This is the land of opportunity. Pretty much every altcoin in the last week appreciated, some of them by 20, 30, or even 40%. Now, some did better than others. One of the best performers is Zcash. Zcash appreciated by 50% in the last week, and there are news supporting that appreciation. For example, a digital currency group is buying more than 200,000 ZEC. So that's at a price of $700 per token, roughly 150 million. Now have a look at this chart. This shows Zcash relative to the rest of the altcoin market. So this is not a US dollar chart, this is a relative valuation chart. Now, why do we want to look at relative valuation in the first place? It's because when we make a decision, should we buy altcoin A or altcoin B or altcoin C, in the end, the only thing that matters is outperformance. We have all of this correlation, right? There are times when everything is going up and everything is going down. So the decision between the altcoins should just be in terms of relative performance. When does an altcoin do better or worse compared to the rest? And that's why we look at Zcash relative to the others market cap. The others market cap is all the altcoins that are not in the top 10. Now Zcash is among them, right? Zcash is at place 11. And I don't like the relative valuation right now. Zoom in and see, we tend to have turnarounds at those parallel lines. A retracement of Zcash relative to the rest of the altcoin market by 38, potentially 52, or in the worst case, 65% is quite possible. It has happened in the past. Now again, this is Zcash relative to the rest of the altcoin market. And what we see at the bottom, that's the stablecoin market cap. When there's no money flowing into the space, so when people are withdrawing from crypto and they're changing their stablecoins into fiat deposits again, that's also when Zcash underperformed. Then once we saw inflows after a bit of a lag, Zcash stabilized and subsequently rallied. Now the rally has stopped, or at least slowed down massively once the inflows into the market also stopped. And so what's happening recently? We still don't have any strong inflows. Maybe we are now turning around, but we are far away from a clear signal. The times when Zcash appreciated were times when we had very fast and very clear inflows. And so that makes me believe that the current valuation of Zcash, it is very stretched. Now again, that's just a statement around the relative performance, as in if the altcoin market itself goes up by another 20 or 30%, then Zcash, of course, can also go up by 20 or 30%. But I don't think that when the altcoins go up by 20%, that then Zcash will go up by 50 or 60% at the same time. I think the outperformance is very much stretched. I'm not sure if Zcash is the best of the altcoins right now. Yes, it was the best bet in the last year, but that doesn't mean it has to be the best bet in the next year. It's always a game of risk versus reward. And Zcash is already at a market cap of 12 billion. The air to the top is really getting thin. Let's say another 2x in relative performance and Zcash would already be larger than Hyperliquid. And Hyperliquid is the largest and most successful and fastest growing decentralized finance protocol in all of crypto right now. Now, some people thought that I got absolutely wrecked with this recent altcoin rally because I always talked about betting on falling altcoin prices. I was betting on falling altcoin prices and I still do. The reason why I did not get wrecked is because I opened hedges. I opened hedging positions. I didn't just bet on a falling price of an altcoin. I also bet on a rising price of Bitcoin at the same time. And so I'm actually at an all-time high, now at 96K in the copy trading portfolio. And I've just closed a recent position here in Stellar. That's a gain of 28%. And I want to show what hedging means. So we opened our position roughly over here and just closed it recently. That's Stellar versus Bitcoin. And with the recent rally, yes, Stellar slightly outperformed, but that's only by 10-11%. Now have a look at Stellar relative to the US dollar. Not relative to Bitcoin, but just plain Stellar. Had we not hedged, the gain would be much more modest and the recent destruction would have been way worse. Stellar went up by 36-37%. Relative to Bitcoin, it did not go up much, but relative to the US dollar, it appreciated much more. And that's what I mean with relative valuation bets. That's why we have 2 positions open at the same time. Always. If you want to get a long-term outperformance without too much volatility, we always have to reduce our risk as much as possible. And I do 3 things here. I don't bet on altcoin prices versus the US dollar. I bet on them relative to Bitcoin. That's risk mitigation number 1. Risk mitigation number 2 is that I always have stop losses. So I look at the charts, where should we potentially exit, where does our thesis invalidate, and then I exit. I don't take more than 15% or so of losses with a single trade. That's risk mitigation number 2. Risk mitigation number 3 is that we don't have too much allocation towards any single position. We always want to have at least 2 to 3 positions open at the same time, ideally rather 5, and we never want to have more than 20% of our entire capital in a position. So even when we bet on a falling altcoin price, and even that altcoin is going up a lot, and even if we are hedged, we're not going to lose our shirt. We might lose in that particular trade, but we can recover from that trade quickly. It's so important because it's very hard to make up for losses. When our portfolio goes down by say 50% from that new basis, we then have to double our capital again, right? We have to make 100% just to be back at 0. So volatility to the downside is extremely dangerous. Reducing the potential downside is much more important than optimizing for the upside. And I know this is not a sexy topic, but it's super important for the long term. Imagine you're a trader with 90% winning rate, but in the 10% where you don't win, you lose, say, 90% of your capital. Now, when you're just back at those 10% after this one loss, you have to 10x your capital just to be back at 0 again. You cannot afford a 90% loss. And I'd argue you can't even afford a 50% loss, at least for the entire portfolio. That's why it's so important to be diversified across asset classes and to have within an asset class also proper risk mitigation. If you just did naked short selling and you used 5x leverage and you put half of your portfolio on that position, then of course you are wrecked now. But if you hedge your positions versus the macro, so you go long Bitcoin while you go short the altcoins, and when you've got a stop loss and when you don't bet too much on any single position, then you can still, even when the macro might be going against you, hit new all-time highs. And that should be the big learning out of this rally. It's not necessarily to try to find the best altcoins and to try to find the best entry opportunity. Yes, Zcash might now be stretched, but we could be betting on a falling Zcash price if now Zcash just doesn't perform better than, say, Bitcoin, right? If Zcash goes up by 10%, but Bitcoin goes up by 30%, we can make money with that underperformance. Now, what you're seeing over here, that's the tutorial section of Premium, where I get into much more details about those concepts. Again, they're not sexy concepts, but they're extremely important for long-term survival in the crypto ecosystem. If you don't want to do active trading yourself, there's also now Bitcoin strategy Autopilot, so that automatically copy trades whatever I do. We've got various strategies. Some of them don't have that much more deposit capacity. It's running out. Others are much more liquid and we can bet more capital. For example, the Bitcoin trend follower. It's now set at a capacity of 10 million, but it could even be moved higher if that's required. If it's your first time here, feel free to subscribe. I publish videos regularly. If you want to check out Premium, a link to that pops up here on the screen as well. There's also a 7-day money back guarantee. In case you don't like Premium, just message me within the first 7 days. I'll refund you. No questions asked. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Cheers.